Have you ever watched someone build their own legal case against themselves in real time? I mean, actually watched it happen. Every move calculated to pressure you, every escalation designed to make you give up, while completely failing to notice that every single one of those moves was being documented, time-stamped, and uploaded to a cloud server? That's what happened here. And the thing that makes this story so satisfying isn't the ending, though the ending is genuinely spectacular. It's the middle. It's watching a person who was absolutely certain they were winning walk further and further into a situation they couldn't get out of, while the man they were trying to break just quietly kept building. My name is Curtis. I'm a cybersecurity consultant and former Air Force signals intelligence specialist. I know locks. I know access control systems. I know how to document every single attempt someone makes to get past what you've built. And for about 18 months, I had reason to use all of that knowledge on a neighbor who had decided that my property line was a suggestion she could simply ignore. My father bought 26 acres on the western slope of Pisgah Ridgeback in 1989. Dense hardwood forest, oak, hickory, poplar, with a seasonal creek running through the northeast corner and a gravel access road connecting to County Route 9. He built a cabin there in 1991. Nothing fancy, 1,200 square feet, post and beam construction, metal roof, stone fireplace, wraparound porch with a view of the Smokies that would genuinely stop your heart on a clear morning. He spent 25 years at that cabin. Hunted deer in the fall. Fished the creek in spring. Sat on the porch in summer reading Louis L'Amour novels until the lightning bugs came out. It was his place, completely his, and when he died in 2016 from pancreatic cancer, he left it to me free and clear. I drive up Friday afternoons, turn my phone off, and spend 2 days splitting wood and sitting on the porch watching the ridge change color. That's the whole plan. That's all it ever needed to be. The Ridgehurst Meadows subdivision went in around 2008. A developer bought 100 acres east of my father's property and carved it into 62 residential lots. Community pool, walking trail, all of it. The HOA formed the same year. My land was never part of the subdivision. Never part of the HOA. The two properties shared about 400 feet of split rail fence along the eastern boundary, and that was the entire extent of the relationship. Diane Wexler moved into Ridgehurst Meadows in 2019. Within 3 months, she was running for HOA president. She won unopposed, which should tell you something. Nobody else wanted the job. Within 6 months, she had rewritten the landscaping guidelines, hired a new management company, and started sending violation notices to homeowners about mailbox height, fence stain color, and whether basketball hoops were architecturally compatible. The first time I met her, she walked up my driveway uninvited during a neighborhood yard sale, knocked on my cabin door, introduced herself like she was presenting credentials at an embassy, and suggested I pave my gravel driveway because it was visually inconsistent with the neighborhood aesthetic. I told her my property wasn't part of her neighborhood. She smiled the way a cat smiles at a mouse it hasn't decided to chase yet. "Well," she said, "we're all neighbors here, aren't we?" I should have recognized that smile for exactly what it was. A declaration of intent. The trouble started with the gate. My property has one access point from County Route 9, a gravel road through the trees to the cabin. My father had put up a basic tube gate at the entrance with a padlock years ago, mostly to keep ATVs out. It had been there for decades. Nobody had ever said a word about it. In March of 2022, I received a letter on official HOA letterhead, signed by Diane Wexler, informing me that my gate impeded emergency access to the surrounding community and that I was required to provide the HOA with a key to the padlock within 30 days. The letter cited something called the Ridgehurst Community Safety Initiative and referenced sections of the HOA bylaws about emergency preparedness and access coordination. I read it twice. Then I checked my property records. My land was not part of Ridgehurst Meadows. My gate was on my property. The road behind it led exclusively to my cabin. There was no public easement, no shared access route, no emergency corridor that ran through my land. The nearest fire hydrant was half a mile away on the subdivision's internal road. My gate impeded exactly nothing except uninvited visitors. I wrote back a polite letter explaining that my property was private, not subject to HOA governance, and that no key would be provided. I included my deed and a survey map showing the property boundaries. 2 weeks later, a second letter arrived. Less polite. The HOA had voted to classify my gate as a community safety obstruction. Failure to provide a key within 15 days would result in fines and corrective action. The fine was $300. I pinned it to my refrigerator and went fishing. The following Saturday, I drove up to the cabin and found my padlock had been cut. Clean bolt cutter job. The lock was on the ground, the gate was open, and there were fresh tire tracks on my road. I checked the trail camera I keep mounted on a pine tree near the entrance. Standard practice. I'd been running cameras since 2018 and found footage from the previous Wednesday. A white pickup pulling up at 2:47 in the afternoon. A man getting out, cutting the lock, swinging the gate open, driving through. He came back out 11 minutes later. The truck had no visible plates from that angle, but I could see a Ridgehurst Meadows parking sticker on the rear window. I replaced the padlock with a heavier one, hardened steel shackle, anti-cut design, pick-resistant core. I added a second camera at a different angle to catch plates. The following Wednesday, the new lock was cut too. Same bolt cutters, same clean job. This time the camera got the plate. The truck was registered to a man named Glenn Furlow, the HOA's contracted maintenance supervisor. The camera also caught something else. Diane Wexler's silver Lexus pulling up behind the truck, waiting at the road while Furlow did the cutting, then driving through behind him. She was inside my gate for 22 minutes. I sat on my cabin porch that evening with my laptop looking at the footage while the sun went down behind Pisgah Ridge. The air smelled like pine resin and would smoke from somewhere down the valley. And I thought carefully about the fact that a woman I barely knew had just paid someone to cut my lock twice and driven onto my land like she owned it. I didn't call the sheriff that night. I still thought this could be resolved with reason. That was about to change. I replaced the tube gate with a proper security gate. 6-foot welded steel frame, reinforced crossbar set in concrete footings, commercial-grade padlock rated for bolt cutter resistance, with a steel plate welded over the shackle so you couldn't get cutters around it without an angle grinder. $2,000 in materials, a full Saturday of work. I mounted 2 additional cameras, everything on solar power, everything uploading to cloud storage in real time. 3 days after the new gate went in, a sheriff's deputy showed up at my house in Asheville, not the cabin, my primary residence. Diane Wexler had filed a formal complaint alleging I had installed an unauthorized security barrier on a shared access road, and that the installation constituted a public safety hazard and obstruction of emergency services. I invited the deputy Indiana. I showed him the deed, the survey, and the trail camera footage of Furlow cutting my locks. He looked at everything, took notes, and left. The complaint was closed the same day. But Diane wasn't finished. She had found a new angle. My gravel road ran along the western edge of my property. There was a short section, about 60 feet, where the road came within 12 feet of the Ridgehurst Meadows boundary, alongside the subdivision's common area on Lot 62. Diane seized on this proximity and began arguing that my road constituted a shared boundary access corridor that fell under the HOA's jurisdiction. She hired a surveyor who placed stakes along the boundary line and produced a report claiming that a 3-foot strip of my road might encroach on the common area. I say might because the report used the phrase, within the margin of measurement uncertainty. In surveying, that means the surveyor isn't sure. It's the professional equivalent of a doctor saying, could be a bruise, could be something else. Diane treated it like a confirmed diagnosis. She sent letters to the county road department, the fire marshal, and the county planning office alleging that my gate was blocking a shared access corridor and requesting emergency review. She copied me on all 3. I read them at my kitchen table in Asheville, eating leftover chili. My blood pressure was normal. I hired my own surveyor, a licensed professional named Richard Goss, 32 years of experience, the kind of name that carries weight in every county office in western North Carolina. Richard did a full GPS-verified boundary survey and produced a certified plat showing, beyond any doubt, that my road was entirely on my property. Not close to the line. Not within any margin of uncertainty. The nearest point of my road to the HOA boundary was 14.3 feet, well inside my property and well outside any legitimate encroachment claim. Richard also reviewed the other survey and noted in his professional opinion that the stakes had been placed using outdated reference points and methodology inconsistent with current professional standards. In plain language, Diane's surveyor had done sloppy work, probably because he was being paid to find what Diane wanted him to find rather than what was actually there. I sent Richard's survey to all 3 agencies with a cover letter from my attorney. Each closed their file within 2 weeks. The fire marshal called me personally to apologize for the inconvenience and confirmed that the complaint had no factual basis. My attorney was a woman named Helen Sharp, property rights litigator, 25 years of experience in HOA disputes and land use conflicts, a reputation for being polite, precise, and ruthless in exactly that order. I mention her because she becomes important. In June, Diane called a special HOA meeting and put one item on the agenda: a vote to authorize the HOA to pursue legal action against me for obstruction of community access. She presented it as a matter of public safety. If there were ever a fire, a medical emergency, a natural disaster affecting the western boundary of the subdivision, she argued, my locked gate would prevent first responders from using my road as an alternate access route. This was completely false. The subdivision had 2 dedicated entrances on the east and south sides, both connected to county roads, both meeting all fire code requirements. My private road had never been designated as an emergency route. The county fire marshal had already confirmed this in writing. The vote passed 41-9. 9 people asked questions. 41 people trusted Diane's assurance that the HOA's attorney had confirmed strong legal grounds. The HOA's attorney, a man who worked out of a strip mall office in Hendersonville and mostly handled lease disputes, sent me a 4-page letter demanding I remove my gate, provide emergency access credentials, and pay $2,200 in fines. The letter cited 3 statutes. 2 applied exclusively to commercial properties. The third was a fire code regulation that specifically exempted private residential roads with no public access designation. He had either not read the statutes he was citing, or had read them and didn't understand them. Either way, it was embarrassing. Helen sent back a 9-page response that dismantled every claim in the letter, attached my certified survey and the fire marshal's clearance, and included a paragraph noting that the HOA's continued assertion of authority over non-member property, combined with documented acts of lock cutting and trespass, could expose the HOA board to personal liability under North Carolina tort law. The HOA's attorney responded with one paragraph saying the board was reviewing its options. That's attorney language for, my client won't listen to me, but I'm not putting my name on anything else. What Helen's letter also did, and I hadn't anticipated this, was scare the insurance company. The HOA's liability carrier had received a copy of Helen's letter through standard disclosure procedures. They launched their own review. 2 weeks later, they sent a letter to the Ridgehurst Meadows board informing them that continued pursuit of claims against a non-member property owner, in the face of clear evidence of jurisdictional overreach, could jeopardize the HOA's coverage. They recommended the board discontinue all actions related to my property immediately. Diane told the board the insurance company was overcautious and that she had other avenues. I found this out through a board member named Connie Pute, a retired schoolteacher on Lot 23 who had been growing increasingly uncomfortable with Diane's leadership, who quietly called Helen's office to report what had happened in the closed board session. Connie was afraid of what Diane would do next. She was right to be afraid. It was time to change the game entirely. The pattern was clear. Lock cutting. False complaints. Fraudulent survey work. Harassment of government agencies. This wasn't a neighbor with a concern. This was a campaign. And Diane wasn't going to stop because she was wrong. She was going to stop when she physically couldn't get past what I put in front of her, and couldn't politically survive what I put behind her. I spent an evening on my cabin porch researching commercial-grade electronic and biometric access control, the kind of systems I'd worked with in the military. The kind that logs every approach, photographs every visitor, and sends real-time alerts to your phone. The kind that has no key for anyone to demand, copy, or cut. 2 hours later, I placed an order. I spent 3 weeks building what went in next. The gate, a motorized 12-foot commercial cantilever gate, reinforced steel frame, anti-climb design, sealed electric motor on solar power. It opened and closed via encrypted radio signal from a fob I carried, or through a smartphone app requiring biometric authentication, my fingerprint or facial recognition. No physical key. No code box. No combination. No padlock shackle. Nothing Diane could demand, copy, or send a maintenance man to cut. There was simply nothing to cut. The access panel at the entrance, intercom, high-resolution camera, and a license plate recognition system. Every approaching vehicle automatically photographed, plate logged and time-stamped, image uploaded to my cloud server in real time. If someone pressed the intercom, I could see them and speak to them from my phone anywhere in the world. If I chose not to answer, the gate stayed closed. Period. The perimeter, continuous fence line monitoring along the 400 feet of boundary shared with Ridgehurst Meadows. Vibration sensors on the fence posts. Infrared motion detectors in the tree line. 4 additional cameras covering the boundary from multiple angles. Everything solar-powered, everything uploading to the cloud, everything time-stamped and GPS tagged. And finally, a comprehensive logging system recording every access event, every motion trigger, every intercom press, every license plate, in a tamper-proof database with automatic backups. Every time someone approached my gate, touched my fence, or walked within 20 feet of my boundary, I would know about it. I would have video. I would have a timestamp. And I would have it forever. I also filed a formal criminal trespass complaint against Furlow for the 2 lock cutting incidents, with trail camera footage, photos of the cut locks, and the license plate capture showing Furlow's truck and Diane's Lexus. Helen sent a companion letter putting the HOA on notice that any future unauthorized entry would result in immediate civil action against the HOA, its officers, and any contracted agents personally. The sheriff's office assigned a detective named Bill Tatum, 15 years in property crimes, who reviewed the footage, interviewed Furlow, and confirmed that Furlow had been acting on Diane Wexler's direct instructions. Furlow was cooperative. He gave a signed statement. Diane had told him the gate was on community-adjacent land and the HOA had authority to maintain access. She had provided the bolt cutters. He said he didn't know the road was private property. Charges were being prepared, Furlow for criminal trespass, Diane as the directing party under North Carolina's accessory liability statute. The warrants would take a few weeks to process. I didn't tell anyone. I mounted a polished aluminum sign on the gate, laser engraved in capital letters, private property. No keys, no codes, no exceptions. Biometric access only. All approaches recorded and logged. I stood back and looked at it. The gate gleamed. The cameras blinked their quiet red LEDs. The solar panels tilted toward the afternoon light. The whole system hummed with the low, patient energy of something that would never sleep, never blink, and never hand Diane Wexler a single thing she could use. Diane discovered the new gate on a Monday. I know the exact moment because my system logged it. At 10:17 a.m., the license plate reader captured her silver Lexus approaching from County Route 9. She sat there for 43 seconds. I have the video, staring at the gate, the sign, and the camera looking back at her. Then she pressed the intercom button. I was at my desk in Asheville. My phone buzzed. I looked at the live feed. Diane in her sunglasses, mouth set in a thin line. I let it ring. She pressed it 4 more times over the next 2 minutes. Then she got out of her car and walked up to examine the gate. She ran her hand along the frame. She looked for a locking mechanism and found none. She crouched down and looked at the bottom rail. She took a photo with her phone, got back in her car, and left. The system logged everything. 14 photos, 1 2-minute video, 5 intercom attempts, 0 access granted. By Wednesday she had filed another complaint, this one alleging my security system violated North Carolina's recording consent laws. The deputy who came out, the same one I was now on a first-name basis with, confirmed the cameras were aimed at my property and the public road, not the subdivision. He closed the complaint in 20 minutes. Thursday, Diane sent a letter to every homeowner in Ridgehurst Meadows calling my gate a hostile, militarized barrier designed to intimidate our community. She described the biometric system as surveillance technology being used to monitor Ridgehurst families, and said she was consulting with state-level authorities about my cameras. She proposed a special assessment of $8,000 to fund a lawsuit demanding I provide the HOA with emergency access credentials. The vote passed 31 to 13. 13 people asked questions. Connie Pute was one of them. She asked Diane directly, had their attorney confirmed they had legal standing to demand access to private property that wasn't part of the HOA? The attorney is working on it, Diane said. That's not what I asked, Connie said. Diane moved to the next question. Meanwhile, something was happening that Diane didn't know about. The insurance company's investigator, a woman named Ruth Chandler, had not dropped the matter after the initial warning letter. She had been quietly pulling records, reviewing meeting minutes, and examining invoices. She found that the HOA had spent $14,600 of community funds on the surveyor, legal fees, the lock-cutting contractor, and special meeting expenses, all directed at a property that was not part of the HOA and over which the HOA had no legal authority. Ruth scheduled a meeting with the full HOA board. She didn't tell them what she'd found. She said it was a routine coverage review. Diane accepted the meeting. She had no idea what was sitting in Ruth Chandler's file. She also had no idea that Detective Tatum's warrants were now approved by the DA and ready for service. She had no idea that a reporter from the Asheville Citizen-Times named Cassie Drummond had been following the dispute and was preparing a feature piece. And she was about to hand all three of them the perfect moment. She organized what she called a community safety walk, a group event where rigorous homeowners would march along the boundary fence between the subdivision and my property to inspect the impact of the unauthorized security installation. She promoted it on the HOA Facebook page, the neighborhood email list, and paper flyers at the mailbox cluster. She expected 50 people. About 30 showed up. For the first 40 minutes, the group walked along the split-rail fence on the HOA side. Uncomfortable but legal. People can walk their own property line. Then Diane stepped over the fence. Not climbed, stepped. The rail was about 3 feet high in that section, and she simply stepped over it and walked about 10 feet onto my property, still talking through the bullhorn about community rights and access equity. 3 others followed her, board members Keith Avery, Nicole Pham, and Mike Castellano. My cameras captured all 4 of them, from 3 angles, stepping over the fence line, walking on my property, and approaching one of my camera posts. Diane pointed at the camera and said, and my audio pickup caught this clearly, this is what paranoia looks like. This is what happens when one person decides they're more important than the community. She was standing on my land, trespassing, in front of 30 witnesses, being recorded from 3 directions, accusing me of paranoia. I was watching the live feed from my kitchen in Asheville. I didn't call the sheriff. I called Helen. Helen called Detective Tatum. Tatum said the existing warrants were already in process, but the new footage would support additional charges. He asked me to email the clips that afternoon. What Diane also didn't know was that her Facebook event had been seen by Cassie Drummond, who had driven out and parked on County Route 9 about 200 feet away with a telephoto lens. She photographed the fence crossing, the bullhorn speech, and the group standing on my land. Cassie called me that afternoon for a comment. I told her I'd be happy to speak once the legal process had moved further along, and I gave her Helen's contact information. Helen gave Cassie a careful, factual summary of everything: the lock cutting, the false complaints, the jurisdictional overreach, the insurance investigation, and the pending charges. Cassie said she was planning a feature piece. On Monday morning, Helen filed a civil complaint in Buncombe County Superior Court. Defendants: the Ridgehurst Meadows HOA, Diane Wexler personally, Glenn Furlow, and the 3 board members who had crossed the fence. Claims: criminal trespass, tortious interference with property rights, harassment, abuse of process, and conspiracy to deprive property rights. Damages sought: $68,000. The complaint was a public record from the moment the clerk stamped it. Ruth Chandler's insurance meeting was Thursday. Detective Tatum's warrants were ready for service. Cassie Drummond's article was in editing. And Diane Wexler had just organized a trespassing event on camera and invited 30 witnesses to watch it happen. Every domino was standing. And they were all lined up in the same direction. Thursday arrived the way certain inevitable things do, quietly, and then all at once. The insurance meeting was at the Ridgehurst Meadows Community Center at 6 p.m. All 5 board members were present. Ruth Chandler arrived with a colleague and a folder nearly 2 inches thick. About 25 homeowners attended, including Connie Pute, who later gave me a detailed account of what happened. Ruth opened by thanking the board for their time. Then she stopped smiling. She laid out what her investigation had found. $14,600 in community funds spent on legal actions, surveyor fees, and contractor costs, all directed at a non-member property with no HOA jurisdiction. 2 incidents of criminal trespass by a contracted agent acting on the board president's instructions. 4 unfounded complaints to law enforcement. A surveyor's report contradicting the certified boundary survey on file with the county. A special assessment vote to fund litigation that the HOA's own attorney had declined to endorse. A board resolution passed in a closed session attempting to classify a private road as a shared access corridor with no supporting documentation. Ruth announced that the insurance company was reclassifying Ridgehurst Meadows as a high-risk account. Premiums would increase 60% effective January. The carrier would not cover any legal fees, damages, or judgments arising from the dispute with my property because the board had been explicitly warned to stop and had chosen not to. The room was silent for about 5 seconds. Then it erupted. Homeowners who had voted for the special assessment realized their money had been spent on a losing campaign against a neighbor who wasn't even in their HOA. People who had trusted Diane's assurances about strong legal grounds now understood those grounds were quicksand. Connie Pute stood up and read aloud the insurance company's original warning letter, the one Diane had called overcautious, and asked Diane to explain why she had concealed it from the membership. Diane was halfway through a sentence about community unity when the community center door opened and Detective Tatum walked in with a uniformed deputy. He identified himself. He said he had warrants. He asked Diane Wexler and Glenn Furlow to step outside. The room went dead quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. Diane stood up slowly. The color had completely drained from her face. Furlow, sitting in the back row looking like a man who had been expecting this for a while, stood without being asked twice. Tatum served the warrants calmly and professionally, criminal trespass for both, with accessory charges for Diane for directing the lock cutting. He also informed the 3 board members who had crossed the fence that they would be receiving summons related to the Saturday incident. As Diane was being escorted out, Connie Pute said, loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "Diane, you spent our money trying to get a key to a man's gate. Now you can't even get out of your own mess." Nobody laughed. A few people nodded. Cassie Drummond's article ran the following morning in the Asheville Citizen-Times. The headline, HOA president charged with trespass after year-long campaign against neighbors' locked gate. The article included photos of the gate, the boundary fence, and Diane leading the community safety walk with her bullhorn. It quoted Helen Sharp, the fire marshal's clearance letter, Ruth Chandler's premium increase, and Diane's own Facebook post calling my gate a hostile militarized barrier. It quoted the deputy anonymously, for unfounded complaints from the same person in 3 months. The article was shared over 1,100 times in 2 days. The criminal charges were resolved through plea agreements 3 months later. Furlow pleaded to a misdemeanor, $500 fine, 6 months probation, cooperation noted. Diane pleaded to 2 counts of misdemeanor trespass and 1 count of directing criminal activity. She received a suspended sentence, 18 months probation, a $1,500 fine, and a court order prohibiting her from contacting me, entering my property, or filing any administrative complaint related to my land. The civil suit settled 5 months after that. The HOA's insurance carrier had excluded the dispute from coverage, leaving the board to negotiate directly. The final settlement was $41,000, $23,000 from the HOA's operating funds, $18,000 from Diane Wexler personally. It covered my legal fees, the security system costs, the surveying expenses, and a damages component. Diane was removed from the HOA board in a special election the following week. Vote, 54-2. She put her house on the market in October and moved back to Charlotte before Christmas. I never saw her again. Connie Pute was elected board president unanimously. She came to the cabin on a Saturday afternoon with a plate of brownies and a copy of the new HOA bylaws, which now included a section explicitly stating that the HOA had no jurisdiction over adjacent private properties and that no board officer could authorize entry onto non-member land under any circumstances. She asked if there was anything the community could do to start fresh. I told her there was one thing. I asked the HOA to install a boundary marker, a simple wooden post with a plaque, at the point where the fence met County Route 9, clearly identifying the property line. Not for me. For the next person, so nobody would ever have to go through this again. They installed it in November. The plaque reads, Ridgehurst Meadows HOA boundary, adjacent private property beyond this point. I used part of the settlement to upgrade the cabin. New porch boards, a better wood stove, a comfortable reading chair in the corner by the fireplace where my father used to sit. I also donated $2,000 to the local volunteer fire department, the same department Diane had tried to weaponize against me, for new extraction equipment. The gate still stands. The cameras still run. The sign still says biometric access only. But most days the only visitors my system logs are deer, a family of wild turkeys, and the occasional black bear that walks up to the camera, sniffs it, and wanders off. On Friday evenings I still drive up that gravel road, open the gate with my fingerprint, park under the oaks, and sit on the porch where my father sat. The ridge turns purple. The creek ticks over the rocks. The lightning bugs come out. And not a single person on earth has a key to my front door except me. That's the way Dad would have wanted it. Here's what I want to leave you with, because there's something instructive in how this played out that goes beyond the HOA drama. Diane Wexler didn't lose because she was unlucky. She lost because she treated the word no as the beginning of a negotiation instead of the end of one. Every single escalation, cutting locks, hiring surveyors, filing complaints, organizing marches onto someone else's land with a bullhorn, was an attempt to turn her refusal to accept reality into someone else's problem. And every escalation created more evidence against herself. Curtis didn't win because of money or connections or a temper. He won because he understood something most people forget during a dispute. The person who documents everything and says nothing is always more dangerous than the person who talks the loudest and writes nothing down. He replaced his padlocks with a keyless system, not out of paranoia, but because he understood that the key was exactly what Diane wanted. As long as one existed, she would never stop trying to get it. Remove the key, remove the argument. And sometimes that's the smartest thing you can do. If your HOA has ever tried to claim authority over something that was never theirs to begin with, I want to hear about it in the comments. Those stories are always the most interesting ones in this community, and I read every single one. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because next week I have a story about an HOA president who fined a 90-year-old veteran over the color of his front door, and the entire town council showed up at the hearing. You're going to want to see that one.